My mother-in-law handed me cleaning supplies at my baby shower, in front of 70 people, while I was 8 months pregnant, while my mom, who cleaned houses her whole life, sat 3 feet away watching. To remind you of your roots, Vivian said loud enough for everyone to hear. Since you come from the help. The room went silent. My mom's face crumbled. My husband did nothing. That's when I reached under my chair and pulled out the box I'd been hiding. The one that would make Vivian scream. The one that would make her collapse on the floor in front of everyone. Because what she didn't know was that I had come prepared. And what I found about her was so devastating, so humiliating, so perfectly ironic. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Kate. I'm 29, I grew up in Cleveland, and I worked 3 jobs to put myself through business school. My dad was a mechanic. My mom cleaned houses. We didn't have country club memberships or trust funds, but we had something my husband's family never understood. We had dignity, and we earned every single thing we owned. I met Daniel at a marketing conference 3 years ago. He was presenting on brand strategy, and I was in the back row taking notes, trying to absorb everything I could. During the networking session, he approached me with a coffee and a smile that made my stomach flip. We talked for 3 hours straight. 6 months later, he proposed on the pier in Santa Monica, the sunset painting the sky orange and pink behind us. That's when I met Vivian. His mother walked into our engagement dinner wearing a cream Chanel suit and carrying a Birkin bag like a weapon. The smell of her perfume hit me before she did, something expensive and suffocating. She air-kissed my cheeks, and I caught her whispering to Daniel's aunt, "Well, she seems nice. For a scholarship girl." That should have been my first warning. But I was in love, and I thought I could win her over. I was wrong. The week after the engagement dinner, Vivian forwarded me an email, "Etiquette classes for the modern woman." Her note, "Thought this might be helpful for you, dear." I deleted it and cried in my office bathroom for 20 minutes. But that was just the beginning. Even her own sister couldn't stand her. Tessa had called me once, early in the engagement, to apologize for Vivian. "She's been insufferable since she married Robert," Tessa had said. Forgot where she came from. I didn't understand what she meant then, but I would. First, when we announced my pregnancy at Christmas, she said, "Well, at least the baby will have Daniel's genes." The room went quiet. Daniel squeezed my hand, but said nothing. Second, at our wedding, she accidentally left my parents' names off the rehearsal dinner invitations. My dad stood in the hotel lobby in his best suit, holding the printed invitation that didn't include him, and said quietly, "Don't let her steal your joy, Katie." But she did. Piece by piece, she took it from me while Daniel made excuses about her being traditional and set in her ways. Third, the baby shower. "Let me host it," she'd insisted at Sunday brunch, gripping my hand. "You're exhausted, sweetheart. Let me handle everything." Her eyes were warm. For the first time in 3 years, I thought maybe she was trying. I said yes. That was my first mistake. The second was believing she'd changed. The third was not realizing she'd been planning something far worse than humiliation. 2 weeks before the shower, something happened that would change everything. Daniel's father pulled me aside at a family dinner. "Vivian's planning something," Robert said, his voice low as we stood in the kitchen. "I overheard her on the phone yesterday, laughing about putting you in your place and reminding everyone where you came from." My stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" He looked ashamed. "I've spent 35 years choosing peace over principle. I'm not proud of it. But whatever she's planning for that shower, it's meant to hurt. Publicly." That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about every insult I'd swallowed. Every time I'd made myself smaller so she could feel bigger. That's when I decided, if she was going to humiliate me, I needed insurance. Not just evidence, a nuclear option. Something so devastating she'd never come at me again. What I was about to discover would blow this whole thing wide open. I hired a private investigator the next morning. Cost me $2,000 I'd been saving for the nursery. "I need everything," I told him. "Her past, her family, anything she's hiding. And I need it before the shower." "That's only 2 weeks," he said. Then you'd better work fast. He called me 10 days later. You need to see this in person. We met at a coffee shop 3 blocks from my office. He slid a manila folder across the table, and his expression told me everything I needed to know. Your mother-in-law isn't who she says she is. My hands shook as I opened the file. Inside that folder was everything. A birth certificate showing a different name. Employment records from cleaning services in the 90s. Tax returns showing a household income under $30,000 before she married Robert. And photos. God, the photos. A young woman in a uniform, 25 years old and unsmiling, working in houses that weren't hers. Her face tired but determined. This is definitely her? I asked. The investigator nodded. Confirmed through facial recognition and cross-referenced with the employment records. But here's where it gets insane. Buried in the documents was a reference letter dated 1996, praising the woman's excellent work ethic and attention to detail during her 2 years of service. The letter was signed by Patricia Harrington. I literally sat there unable to breathe. The Harringtons. The same Harringtons on her shower guest list. The same people she sipped champagne with at the country club every week. She'd worked for them, while now pretending to be their equal. But wait, it gets even worse. That night, my phone buzzed at 11 p.m. Robert. His first words came out in a rush. She's drafting a post-nuptial agreement. For after the baby. She wants Daniel to make you sign it when you're exhausted and vulnerable. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This woman wasn't just trying to humiliate me, she was trying to trap me. To make sure I could never leave, never have any power, never be anything but under her control. I called my investigator back immediately. I need more, I told him, my hands shaking. Financial records. Any evidence of her manipulating Daniel or his father. Everything. 3 days later, he called back. And what he told me made my blood run cold. Your mother-in-law has been systematically moving money from your husband's trust fund. Over 3 years, she's transferred nearly $200,000 into accounts Daniel doesn't know about. Let me say that again. She was taking money from her own son. $200,000. Without his knowledge. Without his permission. I printed every single document. Bank statements. Transfer records. The post-nup draft. All of it. And I added them to my gift box, planning exactly how this would unfold. The countdown to the baby shower had begun, and she had absolutely no idea what was coming for her. The shower was at the country club. 70 women in pastel dresses, sipping mimosas under a white tent. My mom clutched her purse nervously, her eyes darting around the crowd. She looked so out of place, and I could see Vivian noticing it, smirking. Vivian glided through like a politician, accepting compliments on everything. She barely looked at me. I was the excuse for the party, not the reason. The box sat under my chair. Every time I glanced at it, my heart hammered so loud I thought everyone could hear it. Then came the gifts. Designer onesies. Monogrammed blankets. Silver rattles. Each one carefully chosen by Vivian's friends, people I barely knew. Vivian saved her special gift for last. Before we cut the cake, she announced, tapping her champagne flute. The sound cut through every conversation. I have something special for Kate. Something from the heart. Everyone turned to look. Cameras came out. Women leaned forward in their seats. She handed me a large box wrapped in silver paper, and for a split second, her eyes met mine. There was something cold there. Something cruel. I opened it slowly, and what I saw inside made my face burn with humiliation. Inside were cleaning supplies. Not baby items. Not a joke. Just cleaning supplies. A mop. A bucket. Scrub brushes. Bottles of bleach and floor polish. The sharp chemical smell rose up and hit me in the face. The room went dead silent. The kind of silence where you can hear your own heartbeat. Vivian's smile widened into something vicious. I thought this would remind you of your roots, Kate. Your mother cleaned houses for decades, didn't she? You must miss that kind of honest work sometimes. I heard my mom's sharp intake of breath behind me, saw tears fill her eyes, but she kept her chin up. because that's who she is. I looked at Daniel. He was staring at his mother in shock, his face completely pale, but he said nothing. His silence felt like a betrayal all on its own. Then Vivian leaned closer and whispered so only I could hear, "You'll never really belong here, Kate. You're the help. You've always been the help. And after the baby comes, we'll make sure you remember your place." That's when I knew. This wasn't just humiliation. This was a threat. She was going to use that post-nup to trap me, to control me, to make sure I stayed in my place forever. But what she didn't know was that I'd been planning for this moment. And I was about to destroy her entire world. I closed the box carefully, took a deep breath, smiled, and looked directly into her eyes. "Thank you, Vivian. This is so thoughtful. You know what? I have a gift for you, too. I've been saving it for the perfect moment." The smile dropped from her face for just a second. She hadn't expected that. Nobody had. I reached under my chair and pulled out the elegantly wrapped box I'd been carrying for 2 weeks. My hands were steady even though my heart was racing. "Open it," I said, my voice clear and loud enough for everyone to hear. "I think you'll find it very interesting. Everyone will." She took it slowly. I could see her trying to figure out what I was doing. Her fingers fumbled with the ribbon. "What is this, Kate?" She tried to laugh it off. "You're being so dramatic. Just open it, Vivian." The tent had gone completely silent. 70 pairs of eyes watching. Phones out. Recording. She pulled the ribbon. Lifted the lid. And I watched her face go from confusion to recognition to absolute horror. What happened next was better than anything I could have imagined. Inside was a framed collage. Photos of a young woman in a uniform. Working. Doing the kind of honest work Vivian had just mocked my mother for. And below the photos, official documents with names and dates. What is this?" she whispered, and her voice was shaking. "It's the truth," I said calmly, but loud enough for the entire tent to hear. "About where you came from. Before you married Daniel's father. Before you became someone else. When you did the exact same work as my mother. The work you just humiliated her for." The tent erupted. Gasps. Whispers. Women turning to each other with wide eyes. Heads swiveling between Vivian and me like they were watching a tennis match. And then Vivian did something I didn't expect. She started laughing. Not hysterical laughter, cold, controlled, calculated laughter. She set the frame down carefully and stood up, composing herself. "Clever girl. You think this ruins me." She looked around the room, making eye contact with different women. "Everyone reinvents themselves, Kate. That's what ambition looks like. I came from nothing and built something extraordinary. I'm not ashamed of where I came from. I'm proud of where I went." And I watched as the room started to shift. Women nodding. A few even looked impressed. Mrs. Patterson from the garden club whispered, "She's right, you know. It's the American dream." She was spinning this, turning my exposé into her empowerment story. And people were buying it. Vivian stood taller, confidence flooding back into her posture. "I worked hard. I married well. I earned my place here. If anything, this just proves I'm a survivor." Several women actually started clapping. My stomach dropped. Oh my God. She was going to win. She was actually going to turn this around and make herself look like the hero. But what she didn't know was that I had brought more than just photographs. Much more. "You're absolutely right," I said, and the clapping stopped. Every eye turned back to me. We should all be proud of where we came from. But you know what we shouldn't do? We shouldn't build our new lives by destroying other people. I reached back into the box. Slowly. Deliberately. "These are your financial records, Vivian. Specifically, the money you've been moving from your own son's trust fund. $200,000 transferred into accounts Daniel doesn't even know exist. Started right after we got engaged." The color drained from her face completely, like someone had pulled a plug. "And this," I continued, pulling out printed emails, "is your correspondence with your attorney about the post-nuptial agreement you were planning to force me to sign after my daughter was born. When I'd be too exhausted to fight back. When you thought you'd have all the leverage you needed to trap me." The room went from whispers to complete, suffocating silence. Daniel shot to his feet, so fast his chair scraped against the floor like a scream. "Mom." Vivian's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. No words came out. "Daniel, sweetheart." She reached for him with shaking hands. "Is it true?" His voice cracked, and I could see tears forming in his eyes. "The money? The post-nup? All of it. Your father and I were just trying to protect you." "Protect me?" His voice rose. "By taking from me? By trying to trap my wife? She's not one of us, Daniel. I was trying to make you see." "See what?" He stepped back from her like she was toxic. "That you're exactly like her? That you came from the same place and spent 30 years pretending you didn't." And that's when everything fell apart. Mrs. Patricia Harrington stood up slowly from her table. Her heels clicked against the floor, each step echoing through the silent tent like a death march. She walked toward Vivian, squinting at the photographs scattered on the table. Her face changed as recognition dawned, eyes widening, mouth opening slightly. "Wait," she said quietly, but in the silence, everyone heard it. Is that you?" Vivian shook her head frantically, but no words would come out. Her lips moved, but nothing came out. Mr. Harrington joined his wife, leaning over to look at the photos. "Good Lord. Patricia, that's our house. That's our old Greenwich estate. I'd recognize that kitchen anywhere. And that sitting room." The room froze. You could have heard a pin drop. "You worked for us," Mrs. Harrington said. Not a question. A statement. She picked up one of the documents, reading it carefully. "This reference letter. I wrote this. I remember now. You were so meticulous about everything." Daniel turned to stare at his mother, his face white as a sheet. "Mom? Is this true? She never told you?" Mrs. Harrington looked genuinely shocked. "I wrote her a glowing reference when she left our employment. She was excellent at her job. Why in the world would you hide that?" "You're lying," Vivian gasped, but everyone could hear how hollow it sounded. Her voice cracked on the last word. "I'm not lying," Mrs. Harrington said, her voice firm. "I keep all our household employment records. I can verify every word if needed." "No," Vivian screamed. And then she completely lost it. She made a sound between a wail and a scream, then collapsed on the floor, clawing at the photographs like she could make them disappear. "So you tried to destroy me instead," I said quietly. "You humiliated me, took from your own son, all to protect a lie." Daniel knelt beside her, but when she reached for him, he pulled back. "Is it true? All of it?" She couldn't look at him. He stood up slowly, looked at me. "I think we should go," he said quietly, offering me his hand. We left Vivian there on the floor, surrounded by 70 women who just watched her entire world disintegrate. In the parking lot, Daniel stopped. "How long have you known?" 2 weeks about her past. A few days about the money and the post-nup. "Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me?" I asked. "You've never believed me about her, Daniel. You've made excuses for 3 years. His face crumpled. "I didn't know how to." "You did know. You just chose her over me. Every single time." "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to choose. Right now. Me or her. Because I'm done being second place, and our daughter deserves to watch her father stand up for what's right." The silence stretched between us. "If you have to think about it this long," I said, "then you've already chosen." I turned to get in the car, and he grabbed my hand. "You," he said, voice raw. "I choose you. I should have chosen you 3 years ago. I should have chosen you every single day, and I didn't, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. But I'm choosing you now. I'm choosing our daughter. I'm choosing us." "Prove it," I said. "Go back in there and tell your mother what she did was unforgivable. Tell her she doesn't get to meet our daughter until she apologizes to me and returns every penny. And mean it, Daniel." He stared at me, then turned and walked back into the country club. I drove to my parents' house and sat in their kitchen while my mom made tea, and my dad held my hand. Daniel came home 6 hours later, eyes red, looking like he'd aged a decade. "I told her," he said, voice hoarse. "Everything you said and more. She's cut off financially until she makes things right. She's staying with my aunt. And Kate, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Our daughter was born in May. We named her Grace Elizabeth, after my grandmother, who cleaned houses her whole life and still put 3 kids through college." Robert came to the hospital with tears in his eyes. Vivian stayed away. 2 weeks after the shower, Tessa called me. "You need to hear this," she said. "Vivian went to Robert and blamed you for everything. When Robert told her he'd warned you himself, that he'd helped you, she was furious." After 35 years, Vivian was facing consequences for the first time. Robert stood his ground. Tessa continued. Said she needed to make this right or face the consequences. They're in therapy now. When Vivian finally asked to meet Grace, I thought about it for a long time. About the woman who'd humiliated me and the woman who'd worked hard and built a better life. They were the same person, but only one of them was honest about it. I said yes, but on my terms, in my home, with boundaries. She came on Sunday, brought a stuffed elephant, held Grace carefully, like she was afraid she'd break both the baby and the moment. When she looked at me, her eyes were different. Smaller. Less certain. "Thank you," she said quietly. I nodded. Didn't say you're welcome. She'd returned the money. All of it. The post-nup documents were destroyed. She was seeing a therapist 3 times a week. But the real apology came 3 months later. Vivian showed up at my door on a Tuesday afternoon. No makeup, no designer clothes. Just jeans and a sweater. "I was terrified," she said. "My whole life, I was terrified someone would see where I came from. I thought if I was cruel enough, no one would compare us. But you were never the threat. I was. I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry for everything I did to you." Here's what I learned. Revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about truth. About refusing to be small so someone else can feel big. Vivian and I aren't friends. Probably never will be. But we've reached an understanding. She doesn't get to erase who she was, and I don't get erased for who I am. I kept one of those photos. The young woman working hard to build a better life. It's in my office now, beside my business school diploma. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. Never let anyone make you small. You're not the help. You never were. And if someone tries to put you in your place, make sure they remember their own story first.